it's amazing to me, and it reminded me similar to the Eagles' run when they won the Super Bowl, and you think about, Jeff, all the players they lost due to injury, and despite all the injuries, the level of play, the level of consistency never dropped. Well, think about it. The Niners lose both of their starting tackles for a stretch. Kyle Juszczyk, their dynamic fullback. You've got a plethora of different running backs. You're mixing and matching guys on defense. Quan Alexander, we talked about, he was out for the majority of the season, then came back for the playoffs. And despite that, I mean, think about that. When you take away all of those playmakers from most teams, Jeff, their season's over because the drop-off from the first guy to the second or third guy on the depth chart, it's an immense drop-off. Yet teams that, to me, find a way to keep their head above water are, once again, the teams that they're not concerned when they suffer an injury because they know their depth chart is so strong. Wow. And to me, the way the Niners accomplish that is, once again, going back to the draft, Jeff.
There you go.
They've emphasized the positions such as the defensive line. We've got one guy. We've got two guys. No, we're going to get five guys, and we're going to make sure we rotate them, get them a lot of reps, a lot of playing time, so that when we do suffer an injury, we're still going to be in very good shape.
Well, it's no coincidence that John Lynch played defense.
Yeah.
And he understands what is important. He's the one that's, orchestrating those drafts. And what a tremendous job he's done. And any GM will tell you, and we've been around this game long enough to understand that if you don't have depth, you have nothing. The Giants in the past few years, a few years ago, there was one Sunday that you and I were doing our show. Looking at that flip card, we had no idea who these people were. And we were just sitting there going, where are these people coming from? But injuries happen. But you got to prepare yourself for that. And kudos to them for going out and learning how to pick talent, learning how to draft talent, and develop them so that you do have those guys that can, in a pinch, come in and play. A guy that goes out. For instance, like we said, Quan Alexander was out in the lineup last year, and Dre Greenlaw comes in here and plays his way into basically the starting lineup. But because Quan Alexander is making so much money, Grant was saying that's why they got to play the guy. But truly, Dre's a better player. It's just crazy. And
that also makes them feel better about when they let a guy go because he is going to put more stress on the salary cap, Jeff. To your point, they feel good that the next guy on the depth chart can easily give them the same production, if not better production.
For a third of the cost.
Exactly. And that's what happens when you draft well. See, that brings it full circle to the Giants. When you draft well, you gain depth and substance, so it makes it a little bit easier, Jeff, to your point, to let free agents walk, and you don't feel like, oh my goodness, if we let this one guy walk, what exactly are we going to do? No, you're like, fine, we'll let him walk, but then we've got two guys on the roster that are going to combined make the same salary as the free agent we let go.
And you're looking at Dave Gettleman in his third season as a general manager. This is the team now that you try to look at some of that depth, right?
Absolutely.
So this is when it all starts to play out. And this is when, by the third year, you should start building something really, really special. Now, you look at the 49ers, they were 4-12 the year before. So, folks, it can turn around pretty quickly. But, again, it all goes back to what we're talking about. You build your team through the draft, you build your depth, and then you let those guys develop. Some teams, players develop quicker than others. And some teams, players just never develop. I mean, look at some of the Jerry Reese years of those drafts. Those guys never developed. They never did. And what happened to the depth? There was none. Especially the offensive line.
Correct. But then, Jeff, you have to make up for it in free agency. Because when you
don't want to spend all that money, $200 million
exactly.
in 2015,
Yeah, and then you get into salary cap hell.
You are in exactly.
And you spend another 2 to 3 years cleaning it up, which is obviously what Dave Gettleman was challenged with when he first took over. But the other thing that was interesting that you noted in terms of the Niners, and you're right, they did have a miraculous turnaround in terms of going from 4-12 to 13-3. It's just important, though, in fairness, to note, Jeff, Jimmy Garoppolo suffered a torn ACL very early that season.
Okay.
And Jerick McKinnon was another guy that went down early, and they had also put a lot of money in free agency in him. So I'm not saying that that's the only reason why they went 4-12, but it certainly played a role.
Yeah, I mean, it could have equated to 5 games. They could have been 9-7. I don't know, but
who knows?
The bottom line is that they came back the next year and realize that we have basically the same team as we did last year, guys. But, we're healthy now, and let's go. And that's what they did.
Before we move on to some other subjects, Lance Meadow, Jeff Fiegels with you here on Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. And a reminder, all of our shows this week are going to be pre-recorded. We will be back up and running live next week. So just stay on top of things in terms of anticipating the show to be released each and every afternoon through our various outlets. But in terms of the schedule, as we're starting to preview that, Jeff, this is now the third team in. And when you think about the Giants, how they're going to be tested in the early stages of the season.
Oh, yeah. Paul
right?
and I were talking about that.
Unbelievable, yeah. Jeff. The Steelers defense, the Bears defense, and now we just previewed the Niners. Those are the three defenses that Daniel Jones and this offense are going to have to solve in the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't get in your first division game is week 5 against Dallas. So, I mean, you got to manufacture some wins in there early. You don't want to be, 0-3, 0-4 going into that Dallas game in week 5. I mean, that's just, we're tired of digging holes, right? I mean, the shovel is, the shovel's broke.
It needs reinforcements, the shovel.
No, it just you need to get rid of it. Forget about reinforcement. Just get rid of the thing, right? And so, yeah, those are some tough things. I mean, you got Pittsburgh at home, which is a good thing. But, again, we have no idea what's going to happen. Will there be people in the stands? Will there be a game? I mean, you don't know. Listen, I think the biggest thing, and I don't want to get off topic here a little bit, but I think the biggest thing I touched with Grant is that the league is the parity in the league is going to be really, I think, it's going to be amazing because – there has been nothing going on. I've talked to a couple of the coaches, which I know pretty well, and they're all telling me that the players are receptive to what's going on. They're doing a really good job of learning. They have the whiteboard, and they're doing all the stuff that they have to. But I was also told that there are certain players on every team that they're visual learners. They have to be on the field.
Of course.
They've got to have a reference point. They got to see those lines on the field, those numbers on the field when they're teaching, because it's hard to understand it and physically go through the motions on a Zoom call. You just can't do it. It's a real tough situation for everybody.
No doubt about it. And it's another example similar to school, regular school for kids. Everybody, Jeff, learns a different way, right?
Yes,
some guys are book smart, some guys are street smart, and you need to adapt to the strengths and weaknesses of your group. So there are a lot of players, even under normal circumstances, Jeff, if we weren't dealing with COVID, there's a lot of guys, and listen, you've been around a lot of players throughout the course of your career, that you get them in the team meeting, and they're certainly on top of things, but there's a different level of intensity when you get them on the field, because now they're starting to apply what they learn, as opposed to maybe their level of concentration and their patience is not the same when they're in the film room.
Listen, it would be like this. If you want to kind of compare something, if you want to be a firefighter and you have no way to go out and train how to fight fires really physically and do it, like real fires, and I'm sitting here watching it every single day on how to do this, how to grab the hoses, how to do this, the first time that I get out there and a real fire is there, what in the heck am I going to do? Right? Then this is what young guys, the rookies on this team, they've never played a snap in the NFL. They're learning a playbook that they have no clue on how to run these plays and do things. So it's going to be very strange. And I think there is some merit to the point where if you have some teams with that continuity and that depth, the teams have played together, that's going to help. It really will. And I think if I look at the two sides of the football here, I got to give it to the offense here a little bit more than the defense, because I think the offense has kind of stayed together a little bit. And you know what I'm saying? I think there's more people that have played together on the offensive side of the football than the defensive side.
But it could be quite a rude awakening, to your point, for players that don't have a lot of reps under their belt, and especially
100%.
the ones transitioning from college to the pros.
That's exactly right. And listen, a guy like, if you're expected to play, which there's a lot of rookies on this team that are going to be expected to play, their athleticism and the player that they are is going to help them, but it's nothing it's nothing like having the true, real reps. And there's going to be a training camp. There's going to be some time to get those reps, but they're not going to be as many as you would have had with the full off season and OTAs and mini camps and all that stuff.
Speaking of reps and perhaps limitations on reps, I know on yesterday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, you and Paul briefly got into Bruce Arians' comments, the Bucs head coach,
Sure.
And he was on a recent podcast with Chris Long, the former NFL defensive end, and they were talking about the idea of perhaps quarantining a quarterback so that in the event the virus impacts your quarterback depth chart, specifically your starter, you have somebody who's been away from the team, but of course knows the system that you could bring back in the blink of an eye and can go in and help run your offense. And I talked a lot about this on my SiriusXM shows over the course of the weekend, and to me it's such a fascinating concept, Jeff.
It really is.
Right? Is it not?
It is, and I think Paul brought up a good point, and I don't know, we talked a little bit about this, like the XFL had the team number 9, they called it, right? So team 9 was a team that was put together for the teams to pull from in case there was injuries. There was coaches, there was players, there was practices, there was everything. They just didn't play games. So you could pull those guys off onto a roster. So could there be a team 33 somewhere? I don't know. It's just, it's fascinating. Like you said, it's really interesting to talk about this stuff. So what do you do if you're a team that has this ambition to do this? Well, where does this guy go? He's got to practice, right? I mean, you got to get him some reps somewhere. So do you put him in training camp, and then all of a sudden when training camp's over, you say, okay, you've had your reps, you've done enough, and, I just want you to go play Madden and get the reps on there. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you do. Do you keep him out of the meeting rooms and you zoom him in so he can get caught up on the playbook and the game plans, but, he's kind of staying in the Residence Inn right around the corner? I don't know.
Well, I like your thinking there, Jeff, and I agree with you. I think you bring them into camp, and then when camp breaks, you have them go back home. You have them take part in meetings every single day throughout the course of the week through virtual means, because I have a feeling, Jeff, these virtual meetings are going to continue. They're not going to disappear even once the season starts, because if you looked at the medical protocols that the league handed out,
you can't have that many people.
That 9-page memo, correct. You can't put everybody in the team room together. You can't put everybody in your positional room because it's just not feasible. So there's going to be a lot of meetings where they're going to tell the guys, hey, after we get done practicing, shower, go home, and we're going to have virtual meetings. So this is the way, Jeff, to answer your question, to keep that third quarterback involved in the game plan. And also in seriousness, you joked about the video game aspect. I was talking to some coaches and individuals connected to the NFL. There are teams, and I don't know if you've been exposed to this, Jeff, that they actually started to put together rooms at the facility where you'd put on goggles. I'm not making this up. And it would be a virtual reality for a quarterback where it would be like playing a video game. And if you're a quarterback and you want to get those additional reps, because, if you're the backup or the third stringer, you're either running the scout team or you're getting mental reps. And this is a way they go in the room, they put the goggles on, and they can actually go through the simulation of seeing a defense and practicing. That, to me, is something that you can implement at the home of the third quarterback, and they could stay fresh.
Well, let's talk about an alternative. What is the alternative where both of your quarterbacks are down? They both have been diagnosed. They're sick. They got a quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yep.
So what's the alternative? Okay, now I got Riley Dixon, who's my emergency disaster quarterback. What are you going to start him? There's no way.
There's going to be a lot of running of the football in that game.
and I was telling Paul, and he remembers this, I was the disaster quarterback for the Giants when I played there. And let me tell you, my famous quote is that if I ever got in there, it would be a true disaster. So the term, I use it like it was real.
Absolutely.
But my point here is that, yes, you go into a game with the disaster quarterback scenario, because I played in a game when I was in Philadelphia where it was called the body bag game. We took all 3 of the Washington Redskins quarterbacks out that day, and Brian Mitchell, who played quarterback in college, finished the game.
The running back, right, for the Eagles, yeah.
Yeah, so he actually was with Washington then.
Oh, Washington, okay, that's right, yeah.
But what happens is you have to have that guy. But now you're not in the game. It's during week, and they're tested, and they test positive. So lo and behold, this guy's got to come in, right? So here's the other thing you got to think of, Lance. These guys are going to be tested, and I don't know how many times a week or whatever it is, but if you're tested on a Monday and you test positive, well, your emergency guy that you've been quarantined, he's now got a week to come in and practice. That makes a big deal.
Exactly.
Opposed to if you're testing the guys on Friday and Saturday morning they test positive, and you got to get this guy in here on Saturday where he hasn't taken any reps, and you got a problem. So I think the testing has to be done earlier in the week to identify it, and maybe again towards the end of the week to see it. But I mean, this is what you have these meetings for, and there's meetings up to you know what right now.
Oh yeah,
talking about
absolutely.
all this.
Well, I agree with you. I think that they'll probably test players after games, especially if you're on the road, because you want to make sure everything's good coming back to the facility. Sure. But there's no way to avoid having to then test them again, Jeff, right before a game, because between Monday and Friday, you interact with a variety of people. A lot can happen. Yep. So things are going to be fluid, to your point. Things are going to change, and that's why, to me, the teams that adapt, to me, the teams that are creative and think outside the box like Bruce Arians is thinking, those are the teams that are going to have success. Now, in terms of, I was looking around the league. I would say right now about half the teams in the league have a legitimate third quarterback that already knows the system because he was on the roster last year, and you could quarantine them and realistically bring them back into the mix. God forbid your quarterback depth chart is impacted. But if we're to look at the Giants here for a second,
I got one
Jeff,
for you.
Yeah.
I got one that lives in Summit. Just bring him back. I mean, bring his number 10 back.
Well,
baby.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep. Yeah, something tells me he's got some free time on his hands now. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
except he no longer knows the system, though, Jeff,
matter.
in fairness.
I mean, listen, I feel like Eli could learn a playbook that
I'm with
get through 2 games in a heartbeat, right? I mean, that would be hilarious. And lo and behold, could you just imagine, just because the way everything is in the world today with this pandemic, that's what it would come to that?
No, but we joke, but you're right, Jeff. I think guys that may have just retired who are not that far removed from the game, don't be surprised if they get some phone calls this year if a quarterback depth chart is impacted.
Yeah. I mean, listen, why not? I mean, it's just crazy. It's absolutely nuts. Now, I'll give you an example. If I could still play when I retired, and not now, I'm just saying a year removed after I played, if somebody called me and said, listen, can you come back and play 6 games for us? And they want to pay you X, I would have been there. I would have been there in a minute.
Sign me up.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, that's like, that's a new house or something. I mean,
100%.
It's not chump change. Trust me.
That's right. Yeah. Invest it wisely, and that'll allow you to hang up the real all-time jersey retirement a little bit early.
And
yes.
The nice thing about that is, if you get another year of pension, you get another year of benefits.
There you go. See,
it works out for the best.
You already have it mapped out. It sounds like you're anticipating a phone call, Jeff. That's what it sounds like. You got your whole game plan laid out for the 2020 season.
Yeah, exactly.
Something tells me I may have a pregame show that I'm going to have to be describing your play as opposed to getting your commentary.
I
maybe.
doubt it. I really doubt it. I hope not.
But in all seriousness, in terms of the Giants, because I was looking at a variety of teams, here's what I'm thinking. If you apply this thought process that Bruce Arians is talking about, I actually think the Giants are in a very good position because they've got Daniel Jones as the starter.
Well, they have 9 quarterbacks on the
correct.
roster.
Well, based on number, you're right. But let's take it a step further. Colt McCoy right now in line to be the backup. Alex Tanney's on the roster too. Okay, you can't rule him out. But here's the guy I'd quarantine if you can. Cooper Rush.
Oh, my God.
Jeff,
he's smart.
Right?
He understands the system.
He knows
He's
the
been in
system
Dallas.
already.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have him quarantined, and then in a pinch, Jason Garrett knows that Cooper spent all that time in Dallas without many reps. In a pinch, we could bring him in. So I actually think the Giants ideally are set up that right now, if they finalize their 53-man roster and they wanted to take one of the 3 and quarantine them, Cooper Rush, to me, is an excellent candidate.
Do we dare say that they were just forward thinkers here and did that on purpose?
So they beat Bruce Arians to the punch? Is that what you're saying?
Let's call a spade a spade. I think that's
maybe.
what happened.
Who knows? But I do realistically think that for the Giants, they're actually set up very nicely for this.
Who is this Joe Judge guy? I mean, he got like a crystal ball? He understands.
He may.
I mean, he is way forward thinking here. I love it.
Absolutely.